Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
This is Bigger Questions with your host, Robert Martin.
Welcome to Bigger Questions, recorded live in the city of Melbourne. Today's big question: what is authentic spirituality? Today we're asking this question to Dr. Matthew Jacoby. Matt is a church pastor, lecturer at Melbourne School of Theology and lead singer of the Psalms project band Sons of Korah, and he joins me now. Please welcome Dr. Matthew Jacoby. Well, Matt, welcome to Bigger Questions.
It's great to be with you.
Now, you're a lead singer, guitarist and songwriter of the band Sons of Korah, but who are the Sons of Korah?
Well, we've been going for over 20 years,
Yeah.
and we're a five-piece ensemble. We've been based in Australia. We've travelled extensively around the world and focusing exclusively on the Psalms.
Right. Wow. Is there any particular reason for focusing on the Psalms?
When I was doing my undergraduate studies in theology, I was also working as a musician, and I just was drawn to the Psalms as a body of songs. And, I kept going with my studies, but I also kept going with this idea of putting the Psalms to music, and it just caught on. I became fascinated with it, and 20-odd years later, I'm still going.
Right. Wow. Now, the Sons of Korah, they're actually mentioned in the Psalms themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. So they are an original group who composed some of the Psalms.
Right. And so they're not the same as you, though?
No, we're not that old. Just 20 years. Not,
you're not quite
right.
that old.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have thought. Yeah. So effectively, are you a cover band then? Is that right?
Yes, more or less. Yeah.
Cover the Psalms. Yeah. So do you think that the original Sons of Korah would sound the same as what you guys do?
Well, it's interesting. I think they probably would have sounded more like what we know today as Arabic music. Not exactly, but something like that. So very sort of multi-tonal and with that very Eastern sound. I think some people, we forget sometimes that they come from that Eastern area. So I think that sound would have...
Was that what you were trying to do with the band, to try to capture that Eastern sound, or was it
not really. We do mix in some of that. I mean, a lot of our stuff is quite what we would refer to as multi-ethnic. I mean, we draw sounds from a lot of different places, but we do mix in quite a bit of that Eastern Arabic sort of flavour.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, to kick off Bigger Questions, we like to ask a couple of smaller questions. We do try to have a bit of fun on the show, and today we're asking Matt Jacoby about authentic spirituality. So, Matt, I thought I'd test you on how spiritual are you? Now, I'm using some online quiz I found somewhere on the internet. Now, are you a fan of online quizzes for profound life advice?
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you've already done this quiz, so maybe we'll find out. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, there are 3 questions, each with multiple options, and these questions will give an idea of exactly how spiritual you are. Okay, question 1. Do you like to look at the stars? A, yes, I feel very connected to them. B, who doesn't? C, when I remember. Or D, only if there's a meteor shower or something.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Okay, so you're going for a B there. Okay,
yeah, I'm going for a B.
Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, question 2. Do you own crystals? A, yes, I have a great collection. B, I have a few. C, I might have some in jewellery. Or D, what? No.
D.
Okay. Question 3. Do you meditate? A, yes, consistently. B, once in a while. Or C, nope.
A.
Yes, consistently. Okay,
Yep.
Well, Matt, according to this quiz, you probably sit in the middle, I think, because if you answered mainly A's, you would be very spiritual, according to this quiz. It would say taking time to meditate, being kind to others, etc., and being true to yourself. If you answered mainly sort of D's and C's, etc., you would not be spiritual.
Okay.
You would be thinking more about science, etc., but you have a little bit of spirituality in you, it says. You may like to meditate, own some crystals, or debate the meaning of it all, although you don't own any crystals. But you don't get into too much depth. It's just the manner right of exploration and soul-searching for you. So
I'm very encouraged. Thank you for that. Thank you, David.
So, Matt, according to this, you have a little bit of spirituality in you. Please, round of applause for Matt's spiritual journey. So, Matt, spirituality is often associated with astrology, meditation, crystals, yoga, etc. So why is this? What are they tapping into for this kind of spirituality?
I think spirituality is, or seems to be in popular usage, some kind of reach outside of the tangible, what we call the empirical world, beyond science into the unknown mystery, into another perhaps spiritual dimension,
right.
and an attempt to somehow tap into that in some way. That I think very broadly.
To connect with something greater, so to speak,
yeah,
like
that's
transcendent or something.
Yeah, it does. I don't think it always involves God. I mean, I think it should, but in the way that it's popularly observed, it doesn't always involve God.
There are many people that are spiritual but not religious, or don't believe in God necessarily. That's right.
They
sort of accept spirituality as something broader than that.
Yeah.
Now, I did the quiz, and I
How
found
did you
out
go?
that I wasn't very spiritual, apparently. I got a statement that you are not spiritual, you don't spend too much time thinking about what the meaning is behind life, or looking to the world and nature for answers. Concrete science is the name of the game for you.
Wow, you should work on that.
Well, maybe the quiz perhaps is, I don't know if it was something to do with the quiz, but so it did make me wonder though, is rationality and science then the opposite of authentic spirituality?
No. I think a good way to describe it, and it has been described, that as a Christian I would reason from a place of faith, whereas I think science would attempt to reason to conclusions.
Right, okay.
So in a sense, and that's not to say that I think that faith is just assuming things in the absence of evidence. No, I think faith is much more personal. I think it personally puts us in touch with a reality that is beyond what we can know empirically.
Yeah.
So I think there is a really important place for science and reason. I just think it's important to understand what that place is, that it's part of something bigger. I find the idea of a universe that we limit to just a tangible empirical universe, I find that to be far too narrow.
Yeah. Well, because this was what the Enlightenment project was about in some sense. Because, so for example, someone like Karl Marx, who was a great 19th century atheist thinker, he claimed that the universe was simply full of matter only and no spiritual dimensions. And I think it was part of the Enlightenment project was to suggest that with the rise of science and objective rationalism, that spirituality was going to disappear.
Yeah, well, the radical Enlightenment, of course, the what they call a moderate Enlightenment, they were deists. They possibly weren't Christian, but certainly deists. But the radical Enlightenment, absolutely, they wanted to see reason and science enthroned. Now that, of course, then assumes that we have to take a reductionist approach to how we think about everything and reduce everything, the tangible, empirical universe.
So that's limited then, would you think?
I think it's enormously limited. In fact, I think that idea that we reduce the universe, that positivist idea that we reduce the universe just to the tangible empirical universe, and there's nothing outside of what, we admit no truth outside of what the scientific method can potentially verify. I think that is something that is completely untenable.
Yeah.
And I don't think many people beyond very militant atheists would subscribe to that.
Yeah. And so the very fact that there is this enduring spirituality would indicate that there's something that the human experience perhaps seems to grasp at something more?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Rodney Stark, in his book, The Triumph of Faith, and he argues against what's known as the secularization thesis. And the secularization thesis is that this idea that the more we know, the more technologically we become, the more intellectually sophisticated we become as people, the less inclined we are to faith and spirituality. And he actually shows in The Triumph of Faith, which is his most recent book, he actually shows from the best reading of the latest statistics that is completely off the mark. That actually with secularization, with the process of technological advance, that we are actually becoming more spiritual.
Right. Yeah. So the Enlightenment sort of proposal is actually flipped on its head. It's actually going the opposite way.
Well, the Enlightenment did us a favour in one sense, is in that it essentially ditched what we would call Christendom, which is, and again, Rodney Stark refers to monopoly religions, very powerful nation states that were Christian in inverted commas. And by doing away with that, I mean, it's interesting, during the Enlightenment, as we see the beginning of the end of Christendom, we see the rise of a new and very vitalised form of Christian spirituality that we know now today as evangelicalism, with John Wesley and the Great Awakening in America and
there's a sense
Europe.
that it laid the seeds for something more authentic, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So what is at the heart of spirituality? Because it's broader than crystals, yoga and meditation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It's a funny term, spirituality. I think at worst it can denote something a little bit too dualistic, where we talk about our spiritual life as though it's different from our physical life.
Yeah.
It has something a little bit platonic about it. So it's all about what happens inside the ghost, inside the machine,
Right,
and not
yeah.
what happens to the machine.
So you'd say that you try to bring the two a bit more closely together?
Yeah. I think I would want, if I use the term spirituality, and I'm really happy to use that term, it is much more a holistic thing about how I live my life. It's not an otherworldly thing. It's about living in this world and enjoying and being a steward of this world from a particular perspective and vantage point.
Now, questions has come in from our text line, from our live audience, and it's connected to the idea that you're a singer, a musician.
Yeah.
And he's asked the question, what is it about songs, i.e. music and lyric, that reveal our spirituality?
There's a great quote by Victor Hugo. Music expresses that which cannot be said, but on which it's impossible to remain silent. Right. So it's a form of expression that goes beyond propositions. I mean, this is the same of a lot of art forms, particularly abstract art forms, are an attempt to get beyond pure propositions, because we understand that logical propositions are limited to the logical universe, but there is more to the universe than just the space-time element. That there is this spiritual, this other dimension, if you will.
And perhaps more to the human experience as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Kandinsky, in his book on the spirituality of art, he discusses, the importance of art, and particularly abstract art, as expressing, again, that which is beyond propositions. And I think if we limit our experience of life to that which can be encapsulated in facts and propositions, I think we miss out on the most important part of life. The most important things in life, namely God, in my view, cannot be grasped, but can only be known when God grasps us. It's a kind of knowledge that we don't have by mastering it, but we have this knowledge by virtue of it mastering us. And so I think there's a danger in the sort of demand for this, logical proofs for our faith, because it assumes that God is something empirical, and spiritual things are something
goes beyond
empirical, and it goes way beyond that.
So why is God the ultimate for you?
Because I believe God is the ultimate. Now, I didn't come to that belief in a sort of inductive, logical fashion. I mean, I in my late teens, I was a pretty deep-thinking kid, and I decided that I was an atheist. And I had in my late teens, and not having any religious or background at all, actually, I had a very powerful experience of God that led me to faith.
So what was that experience? Can you unpack that?
Well, it's difficult to explain, but I had a sense of my own discordance with God before I even believed in God. I had this increasing sense of the discordance of my life, and I had some Christians around me, and so I knew a little bit about that. And there were, but it actually led to me saying, feeling compelled to say, well, I believe in God, but the whole Jesus thing I just thought it was nonsense, until this sense of discordance actually weighed me down to the point where I was absolutely crushed by it. And I remember one day I was on a bus, a very long journey when we used to catch buses, and the old Greyhound bus. And I was sitting there, and I was so crushed by this sense of discordance, by guilt, I would call it, and And the prayer that came out of my mouth was, Jesus, if you will forgive me, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And I felt that weight of guilt lift off me. It was like a physical experience lifting off me. And I knew that I was in the grasp of something way bigger than I could understand. And I spent the following years with my understanding catching up on what had actually happened to me.
Yeah.
It's like God had taken hold of me and my mind then had to catch up.
Yeah. And then hence there's in some respects, I suppose you've just outlined the problem with spirituality in some sense. There's something bigger that words perhaps couldn't quite fully describe.
Yeah, that's right. But it's important that we do describe it. Someone once said to me, someone who was more in the Eastern kind of religious, perhaps more New Age, well, perhaps we shouldn't talk about it all. Why do we need to have doctrines and give things names? Well, that works in a very individualistic kind of spirituality, but I believe the test of any worldview, of any system of thought, is its power to create true community and bind people together. So I think it's important that we have a language set that works to give that a sort of verbal dimension, and that then becomes a common way of us speaking together with one another about God. And so I think, for me, theology and the study of theology and the Bible helps me to articulate what has happened, to articulate and understand what has happened to me. And it's like learning the language of God.
Right. And you find that in the Psalms as well, in particular?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Psalms are like an experiential pathway. Like a pathway through a jungle that's been trodden down, and you can follow that pathway. It's like, people have been here before.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to follow this pathway, and it starts in the swamp, so to speak, with the lament psalms and God, why are you far away, and why, don't you ever answer my prayers? And, it starts in this place of real honesty, and it tracks the journey of faith in a very honest way to a place of genuine encounter with God. And so I think the Psalms are actually not just for us to read, but to experience and to journey with. And I think that music is the best way to do that.
And particularly by the Sons of Korah.
Particularly, yeah. Well, exclusively, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we reflect on one of these spiritual songs right now? Because we're asking Matt Jacoby today's big question, what is authentic spirituality? And in Psalm 37, which isn't actually a psalm by the Sons of Korah, the psalmist in Psalm 37 says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Now, you've claimed that delight in the Lord lies at the heart of authentic biblical spirituality. So why is that?
I think what is happening in the Psalms, when you look at the Psalms, you've got to think process, that people are working from where they are and they're seeking God. And I think often we're far too passive in the way that we approach spiritual things. It's just something that happens to me. Whereas I think I think we need to seek and lean in. And what I see happening in the Psalms is the exercising of a desire for that which is most desirable. It's like I'm aligning my desires with what is most important in life. I think there's a certain discordance that happens when we pursue things that are not most important in life. So the pursuit of that which is ultimate, I'm putting this in very general terms, the pursuit of that which is ultimate is the ultimate state of alignment. What you see in the Psalms is them seeking and pursuing God in the midst of their circumstances. Not even often their circumstances are deplorable circumstances, but they're not primarily chasing a change in their circumstance. They're wanting to find God in their circumstance. And so it's what is happening here is the sort of liberation of desire from all of the other things that concern it, and the focusing of desire on that which is most important, most desirable, and ultimate in life.
And I suppose also, this idea that it says, take delight in the Lord. Is that part of that seeking after him?
Absolutely. It's like I'm going to make most important what is most important, even if I'm not sure exactly what that is. But when you come to that point of thinking, surely there's more to life than just this, like you're right on the mark there. Like that's a good place to start. And that sense that, well, I feel innately, and I think this is innate in us, I feel innately that there is an ultimate reality with which I need to make sure that I'm in touch with
and connect to.
That I connect to.
Yeah.
And I think that must become the most important thing because it is the most important thing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the ultimate.
That's right. Yes. But why God and not some other sort of ultimate reality that other sort of forms of spirituality connect to, or even ourselves? Like some forms of spirituality are inherently connecting to ourselves. So why can't ourselves be the ultimate reality?
Yeah. Well, if there is no God, in a way, I think Descartes was right when he reasoned that if there is no God, there is no way for us out of our solipsistic sort of universe, and by that I mean, we're stuck within this very limited perspective. So either there is a God or we're trapped in this solipsistic universe.
This verse also says in Psalm 37, it says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Now, my eldest son currently desires a Maserati and a Steinway piano. Is that what's being spoken of here?
Well, if he wants a Maserati and a Steinway piano, I would suggest that he goes and talks to God about that. It's like, I think you should take all of your desires to God.
Yeah.
But it may be that what God does is that he doesn't give you what you desire, that he actually changes what you desire. And more often than not, for me, what happens when I bring myself into a place where I'm meeting with God and reflecting on God and talking to God and allowing God by his Spirit to talk to me is the transformation of my desires and the alignment of my desires with his desires. That is what is most important.
But is that a good thing, though? Is that for our benefit?
Absolutely, it is, because I am then desiring what is ultimately desirable, to come back to what I said before. And there is a liberation of the soul in that. We are burdened when we pursue things that we're not made to desire. Desire is of such a nature that it's meant to be insatiable. So if you desire things, or if you even desire people and relationships as objects, you're never going to get to a point where you're satisfied with that. But desire, I believe, was made for what is ultimately desirable, which is God. And actually, it's good that you never get to a place where you are satisfied. It's meant to be insatiable. So desire is made for relationship and ultimately for relationship with God.
Elsewhere in the psalm, in verse 7 of Psalm 37, and in light of the observation of the wicked, the psalmist encourages in the first part of verse 7 to be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. So could this be seen as a sort of a form of meditation, perhaps, being still and waiting for God?
Yeah, this is the form that I referred to, actually.
When you answered the quiz before.
When I answered the quiz, that made
meditation.
That declared that I was a moderately spiritual person. Right. One of the things that I do constantly is that I sit and simply wait for God. Now, that sounds strange, but for me, it's exercising my desire for God. It's allowing my heart and my desires to know that if I don't have God, everything is futile.
A lot of questions have come in from our text line, from our live audience here. You talked about coming into a place where you meet with God. How do I do that? What's the first step?
Steps, it's a funny sort of term, steps. It's a relationship. This is a relationship. I think we can think in ways about spirituality that take it away from relationship. It's one of the problems with a lot of forms of spirituality, a lot of popular forms, is that they exclude the relational element. It's about techniques, mind, discipline technique, which I think are fine. I think we need to think of this relationally, that there exists a God who wants to have a relationship with us. And so I think we just should start really honestly, like the Psalms do, to bring it back to the Psalms. They say how they feel. And if they feel like God's far away, if they feel that God has let them down, they just express exactly that. And so I think honesty is the best way to start.
So you've been singing and reflecting on the Psalms for 25 years or so. How has that affected you?
I've actually memorised probably about 100 Psalms.
Okay.
And so...
Does that include the longest one, Psalm 119?
No, it does not include that one. That would be impressive. And so I do find that it is a little like learning a language of faith. They have directed and set a course for the way that I pray and relate to God. And it's been enormously fruitful for me to do that. So music has become a wonderful tool for internalising the text and making it extra personal.
And so how's it impacted your life then? How's it changed you?
It's expanded my understanding, expanded my relationship with God, made it more personal, because I think we tend to be what I would call quite religious. We think about, now what should I say? What are the steps? Whereas the Psalms show us we just be honest, and they validate that level of honesty. And so I feel that in the Psalms and by using the Psalms, they have led me to a place of far more real and vitalised experience.
Now, many people are searching for an inner sense of peace. So could these Psalms, these ancient spiritual songs, help?
Yeah, I believe they can. Peace is the absence of conflict, and the ultimate state of spiritual conflict is when our life is in conflict with God's intention for us. That is the ultimate state of spiritual conflict. And when that state of conflict is resolved, and I described initially the experience of that being resolved for me, and it was ultimately resolved by me looking to the person of Jesus Christ, who I never understood, but through my felt need of that discordance, deep sense of discordance and conflict, I recognised, this is why God came to us in Jesus Christ, to deal with that discordance, to deal with that conflict and enmity. So to me, the ultimate state of peace is the resolution of our conflict with God.
So thanks very much for joining us here today.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, Matt. So Matt, what is authentic spirituality?
Authentic spirituality is, in my view, is knowing God, walking with God, and becoming who God wants us to be. And that is possible for everyone because of what God has done for us in Jesus Christ.
Let me leave you with some of the Bible's answer to this bigger question: what is authentic spirituality? From Psalm 37:4. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Look forward to you joining us next time for bigger questions. Please thank our guest today, Dr. Matt Jacoby.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.